scrap metal and steel hearts. The observation deck of the Vextai Dreadnought Eternal Dominion offered a perfect view of the approaching human vessel. Admiral Kethmore stood with his 6 arms clasped behind his back, his crystalline exoskeleton catching the light of distant stars. His compound eyes focused on the crude ship limping toward their patrol line, and a sound escaped his throat that his species might call laughter. "This is what they send against us?" he rumbled to his assembled officers. "Look at it. Welded hull, plates from different ships, mismatched engines. Even their weapon ports are uneven." The human ship was indeed a sight to behold, though not in any way that inspired fear. The UES Defiance looked like someone had taken pieces of a dozen different vessels and hammered them together in a scrapyard. Its hull bore the scars of hasty construction, with visible weld lines running like metal veins across its surface. 3 different types of engines clustered at its rear, their exhaust glowing with uneven intensity. The ship rolled slightly as it moved, as if its pilot was fighting to keep it stable. Commander Zixtal, Kethamore's second-in-command, gestured, with his upper arms while his lower ones manipulated a holographic display. Intelligence reports indicate this is their first vessel capable of faster-than-light travel. They call it the Defiance. How quaint. Defiance. Kethmore repeated the human word, his vocal cords struggling with the alien sounds. Against what? Against us? Against reality itself? A chorus of chittering arose from the bridge crew, the Vextai equivalent of laughter. The truth was, the Vextai Empire had every reason to be confident. For 3,000 years they had dominated this sector of the galaxy. Their ships were living works of art, grown rather than built, with hulls that could regenerate damage and weapons that fired coherent streams of antimatter. Their technology was so advanced that most species surrendered immediately upon seeing their vessels appear in their system's skies. But humans were new to the galactic stage, and apparently, no one had explained the rules to them. Aboard the Defiance, Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the armrests of her command chair as another system failure warning flashed on her screen. The bridge around her was a patchwork of salvaged components with cables running along the walls where proper conduits should have been. Her crew of 30 worked with grim determination, knowing that their ship was held together more by hope and determination than by proper engineering. "How long until their weapons are in range?" Vasquez asked her tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander James Park. Park's console was a jury-rigged assembly of 3 different computer systems. "At current approach speed, maybe 15 minutes. Their lead ship alone outguns our entire vessel, by a factor of 50. And our diplomatic channel? Still open, Captain. They're not responding to our peace overtures." Vasquez nodded grimly. She was a veteran of Earth's resource wars, where humanity had fought brutal conflicts over the last scraps of usable materials. She knew the look of predators sizing up prey, and that's exactly what she saw in the Vextai formation ahead. Defiance had been humanity's greatest achievement and its most desperate gamble. Built in the orbital shipyards above Luna, it represented every piece of salvageable technology Earth could gather. The hull came from decommissioned warships. The engines were purchased from a merchant species at ruinous cost. The life support systems were literally pulled from space stations being scrapped for materials. But appearances, as Elena knew well, could be deceiving. "Ma'am," called out her chief engineer Sarah Chen from her station, "the reactor's running hot, but it's stable. All systems are green for what we need to do." "And our special cargo?" Chen's smile was grim. Locked, loaded, and ready to surprise some overconfident aliens. Back on the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Kethamore was growing bored with the slow approach. "Signal the human vessel," he commanded. "Tell them to prepare for boarding. We'll take their ship intact. The Council will want to examine their primitive technology." The communication that reached the Defiance was delivered in perfect, if condescending, English. "Human vessel, you are outmatched and outgunned. Surrender your ship for inspection, and your crew will be treated according to Galactic law." Vasquez looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These weren't professional soldiers or career spacers. They were volunteers, engineers, scientists, and dreamers who had signed up for humanity's first journey to the stars. They had known this might be a one-way trip, but they had come anyway. "Open a channel," she ordered. Her image appeared on the Vextai flagship's main screen, a human woman in a patched uniform standing on a bridge that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts. To the Vextai, she looked small, fragile, and utterly outmatched. "I am Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earthship Defiance," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the void. "We come in peace, seeking trade and diplomatic relations with the Galactic community." Admiral Kethmore's compound eyes glittered with amusement. "Captain Vasquez, you pilot a ship of scrap metal into space controlled by the Vextai Empire. You are in no position to seek anything. Surrender now and we will be merciful." Vasquez was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes studying the alien commander. When she spoke again, her voice had an edge that made several of her crew members straighten in their seats. "Admiral, let me tell you something about humanity. We've spent our entire history taking scraps and making them into something better. We've turned deserts into gardens, tamed oceans, and reached for the stars with nothing but determination and ingenuity. You see a ship of scrap metal. I see the dreams of 8 billion people who refused to stay earthbound." The Vextai bridge had grown quiet, but not from respect. If anything, the alien crew seemed even more amused by the humans' defiant speech. "Dreams do not stop antimatter, Captain," Kethmore replied. "Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded." "I'm afraid I can't do that, Admiral." The silence that followed stretched across space like a held breath. Finally, Kethmore's voice came again, tinged with irritation. "Then you choose destruction over surrender?" Vasquez's smile was sharp as a blade. "Admiral, I choose to show you what happens when you underestimate humanity." The transmission cut, leaving the Vextai bridge in stunned silence. Finally, Commander Zixtal spoke up. "Shall I order the attack, Admiral?" Kethmore was studying the human ship with new interest. There was something about the captain's confidence that bothered him. No species voluntarily faced the Vextai Empire with a single crewed vessel unless they were suicidal or... "No," he said slowly. "Move the fleet to surround them. I want to see what they think they can do with that floating scrapyard." The Vextai formation began to shift, their sleek bioships moving with predatory grace to encircle the human vessel. 12 ships in total, each larger and more powerful than the Defiance, each crewed by warriors who had never known defeat. On the Defiance, the crew watched their sensor displays as the alien ships took position around them. There was no fear on their faces, though several were pale with tension. They had trained for this moment, planned for it, and prepared for it. "All stations report ready," Chen announced from her engineering station. "Tactical systems online. Park confirmed. Navigation has our position locked," added the helmsman. Vasquez nodded and stood from her command chair. "Ladies and gentlemen, we came out here to make contact with the galaxy. We're about to make an impression they'll never forget. Chen, is our special cargo ready?" "Ready and waiting, Captain." "Then let's show them what human ingenuity looks like." The Defiance hung in space, surrounded by ships that could have erased it from existence with a single volley. But something had changed in the past few minutes. The crewed vessel's engine signatures had shifted, and new energy readings were appearing on the Vextai sensors. Admiral Kethmore frowned at his tactical display. "What are they doing? Their power signatures are unusual." Before anyone could answer, the human ship's hull began to change. Panels that had looked like random patches of salvaged metal started to slide apart, revealing hidden structures beneath. What the Vextai had taken for crude repairs were actually carefully designed concealment systems. "By the eternal void," Zixtal breathed. "Admiral, those aren't random hull patches, they're modular weapon systems." The Defiance was transforming before their eyes. The ungainly engines at its rear spread apart to reveal a massive central thruster that began to glow with ominous energy. The mismatched hull plates folded back to expose weapon batteries that definitely hadn't appeared on any of their scans. But most shocking of all was what emerged from the ship's belly, a sleek, predatory-looking device that hummed with barely contained power, unlike anything in the Vextai database. Admiral Kethmore's confidence wavered for the first time in decades. "What is that weapon?" On the Defiance, Captain Vasquez stood before her main view screen, looking out at the alien ships that surrounded her vessel. Her crew was ready, their jury-rigged systems operating at peak efficiency. The reactor that had seemed unstable was actually running a controlled overload, feeding power to systems the Vextai couldn't even detect. "Admiral Kethmore," she said, opening a channel to the flagship. "You wanted to see what humanity could do with scrap metal. Allow me to introduce you to the future of warfare." The device beneath the Defiance pulsed once, and space itself seemed to hold its breath. The first lesson the galaxy would learn about humanity was simple: never judge a species by the appearance of their ships. The second lesson was coming next, and it would be written in the wreckage of an empire that thought it was untouchable. The war was about to begin, and the Vextai were about to learn why humanity had named their ship Defiance. When scrap metal bites back, the pulse from the Defiance's hidden weapon sent ripples through space-time itself, creating distortions that made the Vextai sensors scream warnings. Admiral Kethmore's compound eyes widened as his ship's bio-neural processors struggled to analyze what they were seeing. "Report," he barked, his 6 arms working frantically over his command interface. "Unknown energy signature, Admiral," his science officer replied, her voice tight with confusion. "The readings don't match any known weapon type in our database. It's as if they're manipulating fundamental forces we don't understand." The truth was even more disturbing than they realized. The device hanging beneath the Defiance wasn't just a weapon, it was a testament to human ingenuity born from desperation. When Earth's scientists had studied the few pieces of alien technology available, to them they hadn't tried to copy it. Instead, they had looked for gaps, for approaches that advanced civilizations might have abandoned or never considered. Captain Vasquez stood calmly on her bridge as alarms wailed throughout the Vextai fleet. "Chen, status report on our special package. Quantum resonance field is stable and expanding," her chief engineer replied, her hands dancing over controls that looked primitive but functioned with surgical precision. "The field is already interfacing with their bioship hulls." "Excellent. Park, are you getting the readings we expected?" Lieutenant Commander Park's jury-rigged sensor array was providing data that would have made Vextai scientists weep. "Yes, ma'am. Their ships are exactly what our intelligence suggested. Bioengineered, self-healing, powered by controlled fusion reactions in specialized organic chambers. Then they're about to learn why humanity survived the resource wars." The weapon beneath the Defiance pulsed again, and this time the effect was visible. Tendrils of crackling energy reached out toward the Vextai ships, not as destructive beams, but as something far more insidious. The quantum resonance field was designed to interact with biological systems at the molecular level, specifically the kind of bioengineering that advanced civilizations used in their spacecraft. Admiral Kethmore felt his flagship shudder as the energy field washed over it. "Damage report." "No damage, Admiral," his tactical officer replied, confusion evident in his voice. "But our bio-hull is responding strangely. The cellular repair systems are accelerating." That was the beauty and horror of humanity's approach. They hadn't built a weapon to destroy bioships. They had built one to corrupt them. The quantum field was causing the Vextai vessel's self-repair systems to work too fast, too aggressively, consuming resources at an unsustainable rate while trying to fix damage that didn't exist. "Admiral," the helmsman called out, panic creeping into his voice. "The ship is becoming difficult to maneuver. Hull mass is increasing." Across the Vextai formation, the same problem was manifesting. Ships that had been sleek predators moments before were now struggling as their own hulls began to work against them. Bio-armor grew thicker and heavier. Weapon ports sealed themselves shut as repair systems tried to fix what they perceived as breaches. Engine chambers became clogged with excess organic matter, but the humans weren't done. "Phase 2, Chen," Vasquez ordered. The Defiance's hidden weapon systems fully revealed themselves now. What the Vextai had mistaken for random hull patches opened to expose missile batteries, energy weapons, and kinetic cannons, all of human design, all built to exploit the weaknesses their intelligence had identified in bioship technology. The first salvo caught the Vextai completely off guard. Human missiles, crude by galactic standards but effective, slammed into bio-hulls that were too busy self-repairing to maintain proper shielding. Kinetic rounds, simple chunks of metal accelerated to tremendous speeds, punched through organic armor that couldn't adapt quickly enough to the impacts. Impossible, Admiral Kethmore roared as his flagship rocked under the assault. A single, primitive vessel cannot... His words were cut off as one of his escorts, the biocruiser Living Blade, began to convulse. Its hull was expanding rapidly, the runaway repair systems now consuming the ship's own power reserves. Within minutes, the elegant vessel had become a bloated, barely functional mass that could no longer maintain formation. "Admiral, we need to withdraw," Commander Zixtal urged. "The humans have some kind of biowarfare weapon. Our ships are becoming uncontrollable." But Kethmore's pride wouldn't let him retreat from a single human vessel, no matter how unexpected their capabilities. "All ships focus fire on the human ship. Destroy it before it can..." The Defiance moved. The ship that had limped into their formation like a wounded animal suddenly accelerated with thrust output that should have been impossible for its mismatched engines. Captain Vasquez had one more. Surprise for the Vextai, the Defiance's awkward appearance was camouflage for a propulsion system that human engineers had built by combining technologies from 6 different species. "Take us through their formation," Vasquez ordered her helmsman. "Let's show them what Earth's best pilots can do." The Defiance dove between Vextai ships that were struggling to respond, their bio-hulls now more hindrance than help. Human weapons, systems designed for rapid target acquisition and brutal efficiency, found their marks with devastating accuracy. The ship that had looked like flying scrap metal was revealing itself to be a predator in disguise. "Captain," Park called out, "3 of their ships are dead in space. Hull expansion has made their engines inoperative. The flagship is trying to disengage, but their biohull is fighting their own maneuvering thrusters." Vasquez allowed herself a tight smile. "Open a channel to Admiral Kethmore." The alien commander's image appeared on the main screen, but he looked nothing like the confident predator from their earlier conversation. His crystalline exoskeleton was dulled with stress, and his compound eyes showed something the Vextai rarely experienced: fear. "Admiral," Vasquez said conversationally, "you mentioned that dreams don't stop antimatter. You're right, but human engineering apparently stops bioships quite effectively." "What have you done to my fleet?" Kethmore demanded. "We gave them exactly what they were designed for: accelerated biological processes. Your ships are healing themselves to death, Admiral. In about 30 minutes, they'll be completely immobilized." The horror of the situation was sinking in throughout the Vextai formation. Ships that had dominated space lanes for millennia were becoming prisoners of their own advanced technology. The humans had found the one weakness that their bioengineering couldn't compensate for themselves. "This is impossible," Kethmore whispered. "You're a primitive species. Your ship is built from scrap and salvage." Vasquez's expression hardened. "Admiral, let me explain something about humanity. We've spent thousands of years learning to make the most of what we have. When you gave us scraps, we built tools. When you gave us tools, we built machines. When you gave us machines, we built ships that could cross the void between stars." She gestured to her bridge with its patchwork of salvaged components and jury-rigged systems. "You see scrap metal and desperate improvisation. I see the accumulated knowledge of every human who ever looked at a broken thing and figured out how to make it work again." Another Vextai ship went dark as its biohull finally consumed all available power. The Eternal Dominion was struggling to maintain position as its own organic systems fought against its control interfaces. "But here's what you really need to understand," Vasquez continued. "This isn't a warship, Admiral, it's a prototype. The real human fleet is still being built." The words hit Admiral Kethmore like a physical blow. If this crude-looking vessel could neutralize his entire formation, what would happen when humanity built ships designed specifically for war? "We offer you one chance," Vasquez said. "Order your remaining functional ships to withdraw. Send word to your empire that humanity is not to be underestimated or threatened. We came seeking peace, but we're prepared for war." Kethmore looked around his bridge at crew members who had never known defeat, now staring at displays showing their fleet's humiliation. The pride of the Vextai Empire, reduced to helplessness by a species they had dismissed as primitive. And if I refuse? Vasquez's smile was cold as space itself. Then you'll have the honor of being the first Vextai admiral to lose an entire fleet to human scrap metal. The silence stretched between the two ships. Finally, Kethmore's shoulders sagged. In defeat, all remaining ships withdraw to safe distance. Send word to the Council. Humanity is to be treated as a Category 1 threat. As the functional Vextai vessels limped away from the battlefield, leaving their disabled comrades behind, the Defiance hung in space like a victorious gladiator. Its hull plates were already sliding back into their camouflaged positions, hiding the weapon systems that had just changed the balance of power in the galaxy. Captain Vasquez watched the alien ships retreat, then turned to her crew. Chen, shut down the quantum resonance weapon. Park, begin rescue operations for the Vextai crews on the disabled ships. Ma'am? Park looked confused. They were going to destroy us. They were, Vasquez agreed. But that's not who we are. We'll rescue their crews, repair their ships enough to get them home, and send them back with a message. Humanity fights only when threatened, but when we fight, we win. Over the next several hours, human shuttles moved between the disabled Vextai vessels, providing aid and assistance to crews who had expected to be left to die. It was a gesture that would be remembered throughout the galaxy. The species that could have destroyed their enemies chose instead to save them. 3 days later, the first Vextai ship limped back to their home system, carrying word of humanity's capabilities to the Imperial Council. Within a week, diplomatic envoys were requesting formal meetings with Earth's government. Within a month, trade agreements were being negotiated. The Defiance returned to Earth as heroes, but more importantly, they returned as the proof that humanity belonged among the stars. The ship that had looked like flying scrap metal had earned the respect of an empire and opened the door to a galaxy that would never again underestimate the species from the small blue world in the outer rim. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in her ship's observation lounge, looking out at the stars that no longer seemed impossibly distant. Behind her, her crew worked to prepare for their next mission, this time as ambassadors rather than potential victims. The galaxy had learned its lesson about judging humanity by appearances. Now it was time to learn what humans could accomplish when they weren't fighting for survival. The age of human expansion was about to begin, and it would be built on the foundation of scrap metal, determination, and the kind of ingenuity that could turn a desperate gamble into a legendary victory. In the end, the Vextai had been right about one thing. The Defiance was indeed built from scrap metal and salvaged parts, but they had failed to understand the most important component in any human creation, the unbreakable will of the people who built it.